students across Texas no longer have access to their phones during classroom hours. And that's been met with a bit of a, let's say, mixed reaction. I think a lot of people were actually surprised to learn that this wasn't some boomer who came up with this legislation. It was actually someone who's a part of Gen Z and currently the youngest serving member, which is absolutely crazy. And on top of that, another bill she worked on made national news with something that came to technology and child safety. So we're going to be talking about that as well as free speech on college campuses. I think it's time to spill some sweet tea. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Sweet Tea series. My name is Ariana Guajardo. Today I'm joined by Representative Caroline Fairley. Welcome back to the show.
I know, I'm glad you're back. A lot's happened since I was here last.
Yeah, it has. You've now finished your first legislative session. How do you feel like it went?
I felt like it went good. I'm definitely glad to be back in Amarillo and not here full time. And I feel
you get to go back to real Texas and away from
Texas,
Austin.
The actual, part of Texas I love. But no, it's good to be here today, and I'm glad to not. I don't think we'll have a third special, so I think hopefully fingers crossed.
Finally be home for a little bit.
Yeah.
So how did it feel like with what you expected versus what happened? How did that go?
Well, people have asked me that, like, Caroline, what did you expect, and was it different than you expected? I didn't have a lot of expectations walking in because you don't know what you don't know, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But I will say, like, I really enjoyed the process of passing bills. I thought that was really fun. I wasn't sure, the complexities of really what went on when you tried to pass a bill and opposition you can have and how you have to change and edit the bill and whip the votes, all of that. So I really enjoyed that, and that I didn't really know what to expect when it came to passing bills. And then I really enjoyed committees. I enjoyed being on appropriations and all that came from learning from, Chairman Bonin and getting to see everything that, goes beyond and behind the budget.
Yeah. And now at this point, now that some of the legislation has passed, you get to see what actually happens from the things that you made happen.
Exactly.
And one of those, and the one that I wanted to talk to you about is the ban for cell phones during school hours. We actually talked about it the last time that you were on the show. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I knew it was becoming a big deal was, so it's months after we had done that show, and all of a sudden on Instagram, there was like a clip that that was pulled from that episode. And all of a sudden, months later, I'm getting a ton of comments that are all from like
Really?
High school students who are like, "This is absolutely crazy. They're robbing us of our rights."
What
like
are they
stuff
doing?
like
This
that.
horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to hear have you been getting that reaction? What's been happening? What have you been seeing?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to remember. Was I last year was it February, March? Maybe.
Oh, I think it's probably February.
Okay,
yeah.
so it was quite a while ago. Yeah. The difference of where we were then versus now is totally different. I feel like so the bill passed. Obviously, in Austin, it got attention and some, statewide, but really was when it got implemented is where we started hearing from schools and students about students were starting to get ready for the upcoming school year. ISDs were starting to prep their policies when it came to no phones on campuses. And we have heard a lot of feedback, mainly there's been pros and cons that we've gotten feedback. Let's just say that. The students have gotten a lot of feedback. So similar to your comments on that post, when the governor came to Amarillo to sign the App Store bill and the Phone Free Schools bill, and we posted a reel. It has like 60,000 views now. And the comments are all these kids in Texas, similar to probably what you experienced.
Right. I was like, why are these high schoolers commenting on my show about policy?
Did you get a lot of like gun violence? Like you should be focused on gun violence, not.
Oh, I didn't get that one. Is that what you were getting?
I got a lot, and half of them weren't even living in Texas. So I was like, okay, I don't think they understand that this is only in Texas. But we've gotten, quite a few letters and mail. I'll be careful in how I say this, but we've gotten several letters where they're like, draw a picture, and they'll be like, Caroline Fairley's the worst. We've gotten some emails that's like, I won't use explicitives, but it's like, you little mother effing so-and-so, I'm never going to vote for you. They don't live, they live in Richardson or some, in Dallas or somewhere.
But they're 16. Getting involved in the legislative process. Isn't that a step?
The one part of me was like, I'm really glad that you're getting involved. You're at least stating your opinion. I don't know.
Reaching out to your rep, that's more than a lot of people do. Their rep, a rep.
A rep, and they voiced your opinion. So I was like, hey, I'm all for this. I think, and honestly, when I got those and saw all those emails, I was mainly like, this is really why we need this bill, because kids cannot even fathom to function, 8 hours without their phone. Like they're addicted to it, and frankly was more of a need. And then the other side was we've gotten since it's been implemented. So probably in July, August, we got a lot of calls, emails, mainly needing to like clarify what the bill entailed, what it meant, how to implement it, what were the appropriate measures. And now, a few months into the school semester, we have gotten so many positive stories about kids engaging with each other. There's less fights. Teachers are so happy. I mean, the amount of teachers we've had locally, but also statewide, reach out and say, we didn't realize it was this easy. Like, we didn't realize that it was as simple as taking phones away for our kids to be engaged in the classroom, for them in the cafeteria to be talking to each other. I know in Amarillo, in the cafeteria at lunchtime, they spend their lunch hour playing flag football outside, and they bring board games. And we've heard similar stories around Texas. And so it's been a really positive post school starting.
I was trying to think about why it got to this place and got to this point in the first place, and why schools hadn't taken measures on this to begin with. And I think part of it was there was a slow buildup with it, right? Like, we didn't get smartphones out of nowhere. First, it was just a flip phone, but texting was, just a couple of characters. It didn't take on what we have now with the kinds of group messages and social media and stuff that didn't used to be accessible on phones. So it changed slowly, and then here we are now.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I decided, because I was getting all of those comments, to reach out to some of my younger cousins. And one of them's in high school, one of them's in middle school. So I texted them just asking, not during the school day, I texted them after the school
Good
day.
job,
Yeah, asking what they thought about it, and how their friends have been reacting. So the middle school one, he responds saying, everyone hates it. And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of what I expected from the comments. But then the older one, he's like a sophomore in high school right now. And he was saying that he noticed he was actually able to concentrate a lot better and focus better in class. And that's what he's noticed instead, is that he feels like that's what's happening, is that like people are actually learning during class.
Exactly.
So I thought that was a really interesting split, though, that the older one was able to understand that. But he also wasn't an iPad baby, because he's a little bit of an older, older than the younger one, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't think the other one necessarily was either, but it's still interesting that the younger one obviously would have been introduced to technology stuff sooner and just more of it.
Totally.
Yeah.
That is very interesting. Yeah. We've had a lot of, for example, when Charlie Kirk assassination happened, we had heard from a lot of parents saying, we didn't realize how thankful we would be for this bill to be in Texas about phones not being out, because when parents picked up their kids, they got to tell their kids about what happened that day, instead of, there's that really graphic video circulating. I don't know if you heard about it.
Yeah.
And
the
and
one
if
where
that
you
was,
actually see the shot in all of the blood, and yeah.
And had that been kids had their phones out, they would have been showing each other all throughout the school day. And so I think that's another appropriate measure that, we couldn't even have thought of or a year ago, that I'm thankful for, that parents are getting to deliver certain news that needs to be a parent delivering that type of heavy news to their kid, and not what social media is saying. So that was something that I thought was really impactful that I didn't even think of.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even think about how that would have an implication there, too.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the only bill that you worked on this session that dealt with technology and child safety. Another one was the App Store Accountability Act, which recently got signed. Tell me about what that does and why it started making national headlines. Especially because at TBPF, that was something we'd been researching. I was not expecting it to be something that was making national news or making national waves. So what happened?
I did not expect it to. I remember deciding to work with, Senator Paxton on this bill, and we had talked about it, and thankfully she allowed me to carry it in the House. And I realized it would be an uphill battle, but I don't think I was aware of how hard of a fight it would be. And the more I had researched it, the more I was really convicted about how necessary this is. And so in a nutshell, it allows parents to approve or deny apps that their kids are downloading or making in-app purchases. And we have a lot of issues with Apple has these age ratings that really aren't appropriate for what kids should be downloading on their phones. And so it's, again, about putting parents in the driver's seat, allowing them to have more transparency into what their kids can see and download. And it definitely was an uphill fight. I remember it had passed the Senate. It was in the House. We were getting ready to lay it out in committee and get all the details figured out. And we realized all these lobbyists were starting to get hired by Apple and Google. And we were like, oh boy, let's gear up. And see what happens. And this was my first bill to actually have a lot of opposition on. Like, you're always going to have a few people against a bill, but when you have all these lobbyists that are against it. And the next thing we know, we start seeing these ads on Facebook and Instagram that says this bill is backed by Pornhub, and it's not a good bill, etc. We had robocalls to our office saying, why are, this is backed by Pornhub. Why are you guys for a pornography bill? And of course, this bill has nothing to do with pornography. In fact, it's protecting kids. And so it goes to show how far the narrative was willing to be lobbied against this bill. And so it was definitely an uphill fight. And so we had thankfully, the people in Austin weren't necessarily swayed, and the legislators weren't really swayed by these ads that they saw on Facebook. Like I had friends in Dallas say, Caroline, I've seen some ads against your bill, and I was like, it's not true. This bill has nothing to do with Pornhub, and in fact, Pornhub's probably against this bill. So, and then I remember we got through, it was coming to the floor. I was going to lay it out around 11, and obviously at this point, it was weird how overnight between, I can't remember what day I laid it out, but let's say it was a Thursday. Between Wednesday and Thursday, the amount of lobbyists that were hired overnight was kind of shocking. And you could feel the pressure in the building. Like you could feel the tenseness of they were passing out amendments, they were passing out opposition letters. You've seen all of those. And I was having to work the floor and re-explain, here's why we're not accepting this amendment, here's what we're doing, kind of keep the group together. And thankfully I had worked to get, I think, about 125, 130 co-authors, co-authors. And so that was really helpful to be sure there was support behind the bill. But anyways, I was about to lay it out. And next thing you know, we hear that Donald Trump Jr. has tweeted something in opposition to the bill. And so I was like, oh boy, what does this mean? And I had spoken with some folks on the floor, and it was like, well, we need to delay it to figure out, why is Donald Trump Jr. all of a sudden against this bill? Like, it's very random. It doesn't make sense. This bill is actually being introduced in Congress by a Republican member. And so we delayed it, and I had to figure out, like, what's going on. So I'm calling anybody I know that has connections in D.C., like, what is going on? Why is, Donald Trump Jr. against this bill? What happened? And we quickly find out, probably in the next 30, 45 minutes, felt like 3 hours, because I'm thinking this bill that we've worked so hard on, like, am I going to get to lay it out? What's happening? And I think, obviously, everybody was thinking, we can't lay out a bill that the president's son is against. Like, we're going to have to think about, like, what are the consequences and implications of this? Yeah. So we find out, I don't know the whole story, but Donald Trump Jr. was actually in Alaska hunting. And there was some miscommunication or something maybe amongst his staffers or something, that this tweet went out on accident. And then sure enough, shortly after we got everything cleared up, he retweeted something positively. So it was kind of like neutral ground.
So it could have been something that just didn't get the right approval or had the wrong communication.
I think it was just some fluke accident. And it goes to show how wild, like, and how much influence the president's son has on politics, even in Texas. Like, obviously we know that, but when it's your bill you've been working on. Anyway, so that was interesting. And then we laid it out, and there's, I think, a few hours of debate, which was intense. And the first time I also had a bill that had, healthy debate between both sides. And then it passed. It passed with, like, I think 130 votes for it, and went through. And then a few weeks later, the governor reads all the bills that go to his desk, which is so impressive if you think about that he does that.
That's a lot of bills.
It's a lot of bills. And I remember hearing through the grapevine that maybe Tim Cook had called the governor, and I was thinking, oh my, and he's
like CEO of Apple?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, like, oh boy, like, I don't know what's going to happen now. Like, will it get signed? Will it not? And had reached out to some folks on their team to figure out, where's this going? And they were like, look, the governor makes the final decisions. He's got to read the bill first. We can obviously suggest one way or another, but, he'll decide what he thinks is best. And I think the Wall Street Journal wrote an article on it. It got a lot of headlines for that about, did Tim Cook call the governor? Did he not? And sure enough, I believe that happened. And then I think even maybe a few days later, I was on the floor. It's like maybe 9 or 10 p.m. I get a call from the governor, and he's like, Caroline, I want to let you know I just signed the App Store Accountability Act into law. And which was such a surreal feeling, because when you worked so hard on a bill, and there's a lot of people invested, not just me, but there were advocates, Senator Paxton, her team, her staff, my staff, the body, everybody was involved in it. And so when you work so hard on a bill like that, you want to see it to fruition. So I was thankful that and not surprising that our governor cares about protecting kids. He always has, and has the best interest of kids and students, rather than, big money. So
Yeah, the session I think really will be remembered as the time that everyone really did focus in on kids and
exactly.
protection and parent empowerment too, which tied closely into the school choice fight as well as this one.
Exactly.
How did he feel whenever you saw his name flash on the screen? Were you scared about what he was going to say or if something else had happened with it?
I had a moment where I was like, oh boy, he's going to tell me one way or another. But I think for the most part, because there was so much support, there was a ton of support and momentum behind it. Thankfully, you guys at TPPF were incredible. And so I think that helped alleviate a little stress. But of course, I was thinking he might have a great reason for not, and something he didn't like in the legislation. So I'm thankful that he did sign it. And he came to Amarillo to sign the official bill, which was really special.
So now that you're, I guess, a seasoned legislator.
I wouldn't say that. I'm still a freshman. Technically, I'm still a freshman.
Oh, that's true. So still a freshman then. But how does it feel like a few years ago? Would you have thought that the governor would just be able to pick up the phone and call you about something, or
Definitely
that you'd be
not.
in this position?
I don't even think, when I say it was not on my radar, like I don't think I had even imagined that. It wasn't even in my like daydreams of being in that position. But I am thankful that I'm thankful to be here, and I learned a lot this session and got to meet a lot of great people and be a part of. That's what's incredible about Texas, is that you get to be a part of a lot of really amazing and impactful legislation. And that's what I love about the Texas legislature, is that there's so many members and so many different opinions and ideas that you get to work and brainstorm different ideas and debate. And I think it's an incredible part of democracy, and also an incredible process to be a part of.
And I'm glad that you point out the difference, or the thing that's so special about Texas in that way. I know that, so if you don't know this because you're like not watching every single moment of what's happening in session, some people might not know that there's like running jokes about how we're not DC, and we're not like those people who can't even talk to each other in DC. Like, I think that there's still, even though there's tensions, of course, between right and left,
naturally,
to me, it looks at least like there's a lot more conversations. Would you agree that that's the
Oh,
case?
I would totally agree. In fact, there was a congressman in Austin during session that I was visiting with, and he was telling me how he's on this committee and a bill that he passed bills, and he was like, "Oh yeah, my Democrat colleagues, like, we don't talk to each other ever in DC. Like, I literally don't talk to them. Wow. I wouldn't even talk. Why would I talk to them?" And when I told him, like, yeah, my desk mate's a Democrat, and he's wonderful. And there's different people in the legislature I work with, or, that we talk with and help with bills on. And he was like, what? Like, you guys talk to Democrats? And I'm like, we do. It's a little different. So there is. And of course,
You're like, yeah, sometimes we even work with them on it. On something.
And definitely on the red meat issues, we will go to bat to debate. And I will never staunchly on those like core Republican issues that I think make up our party. We cannot give an inch to Democrats at all. I 100% believe that. But there's also a lot of bipartisan issues that I've learned, even in representing a rural part of Texas, that is sometimes rural versus urban, not always R versus D when it comes to different policies. So that was an interesting thing to learn.
So one of the things that you mentioned you really enjoyed during the session was getting to be part of the committee process. But you're actually have just been appointed to a new committee. So can you tell me a little bit about that? If it's one about free speech in higher education, is that right?
It is. So post Charlie Kirk assassination, which was horrible and devastating to our country and to Texas, the speaker had gotten together this committee on higher ed and put a few members on it to really look into, investigate what's happening in higher ed with education. How are we educating our kids? Are we allowing for free speech to be on our campuses? And I think that will be a really, I'm really excited to be on that committee, one from a learning perspective, but also to look at, I'm pretty still close to college-ish, because I'm 26. It's
been less than 5 years still?
Less than 5 years. Some people would say I look like I'm in college still. So we'll go with that.
I bet you and I could walk around with backpacks at UT and no one would even notice.
100%. If I don't have makeup on, I'm in shorts and a t-shirt, I would look like a college student. Maybe I probably still do right now. But I'm really excited to be on that because I feel like I can connect a little bit more to what is happening on college campuses, because I had graduated in the last 10 years. And I'm really excited to hear from professors and whoever else that we bring in. I don't think we've decided who we're going to bring in to testify and ask questions about, but I think it's really important, given what happened with Charlie Kirk, to kind of take a pause and say, we need to look into what's happening. Let's not take this lightly, but let's wake up and say, what can we do in Texas in higher ed to ensure that our kids have free speech and that they can express their opinions, whether they're conservative or, they're not conservative, and be able to do both, and protect conservatives. I mean, there's a lot of stories of kids who, speak out on college campuses or in class or write a paper that's from a conservative viewpoint, and they get flunked or they get in trouble, or people are thinking, we don't talk that way here, and that's just not acceptable. It's not acceptable and not okay. And so I'm really looking forward to being on that committee.
And for you, you went to a more conservative college, is that correct?
I did. I went to Abilene Christian University.
Okay, I think that's what I had remembered. But did you face any of those struggles there, or do you think that was an area that still, I guess, preserved some of that more free speech kind of spirit?
Yeah, I don't have any specific memories of ACU, and not feeling like I didn't and wasn't free. I mean, it's a private Christian school, so obviously, I felt like there was the latter of some folks who thought, is this too much of a Christian's college? And I was like, well, if you don't like it, you can go to a different, you can go to a public university. That's okay.
Well, and it's a private university.
And it's a private university, so I don't know what you expected, by signing up to go here. But no, I didn't feel like I had that at ACU. But I think more, I had friends that went to other universities, and I heard stories of them, writing a paper, an opinion piece on, some topic, and they got punished for it because it was a conservative perspective. And that's where it's disheartening, because when you think about even growing up between your elementary, middle school, high school days, those are formative years that you are, basing your beliefs on maybe your family, your biblical background, your friends, and it's in a more protected, environment. And then when you go to college, you're introduced to a whole new a group of people, of ideas, professors. You're on your own. You're away from home, most likely. And that's the moment where I think it's frankly even more important to allow for students to appropriately voice their opinions on what they believe, and not punish them or cancel them. I think that we've gotten a little away from that, and we've got to recenter it. And I think what happened with Charlie Kirk is the right time and right thing to do.
I completely agree. The other thing that I've been reflecting on since the assassination of Charlie Kirk is what our role is now as conservatives, as people who speak out on the front lines, or you as a legislator now. Has that made you think about what your role is within that in promoting free speech? It
has. I met Charlie Kirk. He was in Amarillo for a local charity event that he did there, and got to meet him, and we sat and had dinner together. And one thing I've been really impressed by him is that he's really the epitome of being pro-life, pro-family. He talks a lot about how men should appropriately lead their families and their marriage. And I think culturally that's not normal right now. And I think the way he did that was amazing. And even post, you've seen how his wife Erica has spoken so fondly of him and been so endearing and respectful of him in their marriage. And so I think that's one part that I think is really incredible. And then the other part was his ability to openly debate issues. I mean, he'd walk onto college campuses, and they'd typically be students who don't agree with him, and he would be able to articulate both biblical reasons why he believed it, but also just practical policy reasons. And I think that, for me especially, is really important as someone of faith, is that we have to be able to obviously have beliefs shaped by my faith and beliefs in the Bible, but I also have to be able to debate and explain and articulate why I believe what I believed on just a purely policy standpoint. And he did that very, very well. And so I have thought a lot about, what he did embodied free speech. And I believe free speech is probably one of the most single important issues that we have to defend for our democracy. I mean, when you look at what our founding fathers did with the First Amendment and why they chose that to be the First Amendment, I think it carries a lot of weight and value. And I think that when that's threatened, I think that's an issue, and that we have to do everything we can to defend that.
The other thing that I've been reflecting on is, how do we practice free speech? Because I think, like, for conservatives who try to survive college in this current atmosphere, a lot of people, even ones who I was friends with and I knew they were also conservative, they weren't willing to always speak up because they thought that, they knew that there might be ramifications for it, which is totally fair. But I think that there's also an importance in learning how to defend the things that you believe in, or even think through them and speak respectfully to other people, since we don't practice that. And so I've been trying to reflect on, where does this come from? Where did this start? Where did we get to a place where we can't speak to people? And my thought is, or at least one of them, is that it could have come from the mentality where people say, well, at the dinner table, you shouldn't bring up politics or religion, and it's rude to bring those two things up.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking, we need to completely flip that. Those are the two most important things. And if you want to understand who someone is, how will you actually know someone, or know how to love or care for someone, if you don't know what they believe and why they think about it.
Exactly.
Or even
Yeah.
be able to talk about where your similarities are if you don't know. You might share a ton of values and just you can find that place where you deviate and be able to speak about it.
Exactly.
But with you, who's someone who's young and got involved in the legislative process so early, do you think that did you and your family have that kind of upbringing where you guys talked about the current topics of the day and stuff like that? Do you think that helped get you here?
We did, and I think when I think about my childhood, we had meals every night. Like my mom cooked, and we would eat at home. We ate out sometimes, or fast food occasionally too.
Yeah,
But
life gets busy.
like it's busy, and my parents had 5 kids. I was the youngest, so
Wow.
I was, obviously, yeah. Anyways, but we definitely, I think what my parents did and instilled in me that was so valuable is that we talked about the hard and good topics. And if we had, if I had questions about this is happening at school or in the world and I don't really understand it, there was a freedom to be able to vocalize, that I need to understand this and what does this mean? And they did a really good job of explaining things from both a biblical perspective in my family, but also a policy perspective of why we believe what we believe. And that was huge in grounding, my faith and principles, but also this idea that, you make a really great point about we have to be willing to have discourse. And on this committee, it's called civil discourse as well. There's a part of the name. And I think that's a really important thing to remember that if we are going to, especially as Republicans, debate and argue our beliefs, we have to have discourse with the other side. And we have to be able to have good arguments to explain why we think our policies are the best, why we're, free market, why we're pro-life. And those arguments are really what make up the party. And we have to be able to engage in an appropriate discourse, but also strong, that makes sense and is practical to your everyday Texan and American. And I also think that's why America is so incredible, that we have a place that other parts of the country, you get punished for not, for saying your belief and your opinion. And the fact that we still have that, and I think with the Charlie Kirk assassination is a wake-up call to say, well, we need to reassess where we're at and be sure that we aren't veering off to a side that we don't have free speech and there isn't that freedom to have the civil discourse. But I think that's what's so incredible is the marketplace of ideas that we have in America that we get to express and believe in, and that's why it's important to defend. But you're exactly right about the ability to be able to get to know someone else and why they believe what they believe. And it helps you connect to them, helps you understand, okay, this makes sense why you believe what you believe. Let me explain now why I don't think that's accurate or why I agree with that maybe. So
Right, or it can even change your mind and find blind spots for you. And something that was really formative to me in college and getting involved in the conservative sphere, and this is why I also encourage every young person in college, find at least a conservative group or someone who's working at least in some capacity and stuff that involves your local politics, even just any level of it, is because whenever you're in an environment where even if you're all conservative, you're not going to find two conservatives that agree on absolutely everything.
Totally.
But those are some of the best places where you can learn how to have a conversation about even the nitty gritty, because that's how you get to actually good policy. And that's what I think, I mean, maybe that's what you appreciate about the committee process is getting to refine those smaller details. Is that some of what you experienced with that?
It is. And that's what I love about even the process of how the House works and how democracy works. Like we have to protect on both sides the ability to be able to have, arguments and debate that is good and healthy. And the reality too, I think, is free speech is easy when you agree. But free speech, honestly, it matters the most when you disagree with the other side. And that's why, our arguments as Republicans have to be good and valid and make sense and articulate. But to your point, that's what I do love about the process is that you get to have all these different opinions and belief. And even the House and Senate, you have, a majority Republicans and some Democrats, and there's debate on the House floor to hear how someone else believes what they believe. And you get the ability, it's just democracy. And I think it's incredible. I think it's good. I think that we have to do everything we can to be sure we protect it.
So we've reflected on some of the stuff that happened last session, some of what's coming up in the college campus sphere. What do you think are some of the big fights that might be coming up for next session or stuff we're going to start hearing about in the interim?
So I think this next, no, I'm not predicting anything because I feel like so much can happen in the next year.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like the political winds shift, every other day. But I would say I think water will be a really big issue. I think that There's a lot of, we've just seen water fights happening in Texas. We saw some in the special session. And so I think that will be something that will be interesting to view. How are we going to address this still long term? Make sure there's funding, but make sure there's practical solutions, and what we need to do as a legislature and Senate to be sure we're passing effective policy. I think kid safety is still another really big issue that we're continuing to figure out what are the appropriate, I think, boundaries per se about protecting kids with technology, but also not intervening too much government regulation. You look at that with AI, like we don't want to overregulate AI, but there's also particular boundaries that you don't want kids having sexual relationships with an AI bot. And so I think that's a lot of studies coming out on that. I think a lot of research that I'm excited about. And then obviously property taxes. I think that will continue to be a really big issue that we want to continue to be sure that we deliver results for everyday Texans next session. And then we'll see what pops up. There's always something fun that comes up.
A few weeks ago, I had Janie Lopez on the show, and we were talking about the need for water policy, especially for the Rio Grande Valley and some of the issues they have there, because that's where I'm from. But I mean, I've heard about the water stuff for across Texas, so I will not be surprised if that's one of the ones that comes up.
I think it will be a fight, so it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, but it's also crazy. You're naming things like, water, property taxes, but then the fact that we're at a point right now with technology where we have to figure out how to navigate, like you said, kids chatting very inappropriately with AI bots, or them chatting back to kids that way, it's a problem that I don't think we would have anticipated a few years ago.
No, not at all. Yeah.
So how do you think other legislators are reacting to that kind of stuff, or keeping up with the modern changes in technology?
I think that a lot of legislators are open, and I think the media has done and has, at least to some degree, what I've seen put things out that are inappropriate about AI and, kids being affected by it. But I think that there's more to do. I will say, when I passed the phone bill, there was a little bit of a disconnect between, the older generation that maybe didn't grow up with cell phones, that maybe didn't understand, are these really that bad to have in school? What does that mean? And so I think that there will always be a little bit of just connecting. Hey, this is why there's a really good part of technology that we have to continue to encourage. We want it to grow. It's incredible. I mean, it's amazing, I think. And then there's another part of it that we just need to be mindful about who we're protecting, and kids that are naive and don't know what they don't know. And we need to protect them as legislators. And so I think I think legislators are open for the most part, but I think there is, you have to kind of connect the dots a little bit. But I think for the most part, they're aware.
So if there's someone who's listening to the podcast today and is really excited about some of the ways that Texas is moving, and they want to be able to get more involved, either in local politics or state politics, or just become more aware, what are some of those easy steps that they can take to become someone who's, making a difference in the state of Texas?
That is a good question. I would say, I think obviously locally getting involved, I think Republican women groups are, especially young people. I think that sometimes there's this narrative of, I don't want to be involved in politics because I don't want to be divisive, or I don't know that much. I hear a lot of young people say, well, I don't know every policy, so I can't get involved. And the reality is that you have to start somewhere and learn somewhere. And nobody knows every policy possible. Now, everyone at TPPF, I think, does probably. But
there's a few people who I think do, but but that's why we have specialists too, and they know their one thing really well.
Exactly. Yeah. Everybody but TPPF, but everyone at TPPF does everything. But I think that I think encouraging people to not be afraid to get involved and not be afraid of failing. Like, you have to fail to learn to grow. And there's a lot of things I learned this session that I did not do right, that I thought, okay, I got to learn and pivot and do this differently. But you don't know unless you get involved. So I think locally it's so important. I think do research. Like, I will say ChatGPT is an incredible tool that I use to research different things. And I think there's an element of saying, look up, your state legislature, call them, call your member and ask them, can I meet with you, and get involved that way. I think there's a lot of practical ways, but I would say local politics, I think, is so important that people are involved, and even statewide, but locally, I think people who are involved in volunteering their time and involved in the process, I think can make a difference.
Yeah. And part of why I wanted to start the show in the first place was I realized that there was, for myself, I'm on the film team here. I get to hear a lot about the work that we do at the foundation, but I didn't study political science. I didn't come into this knowing everything. I still definitely don't even know close to half of it.
Yeah.
But I wanted a forum where people who didn't know every single thing, we're able to listen to an episode and learn something without having to know all of the wonkiness. So if you are listening to the show and you think someone can benefit from it, please share this show. But yeah, thank you so much for coming here today and talking with me.
It's always good to catch up.
I hope you get some much needed rest in
Back
the next
work,
few weeks.
Yes. Thanks for having me. It's always fun.
Of course. And everyone else, thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you next time.